What's up, friends? Welcome to a new style video. I am U.S. Army veteran ThatChrisChaos, and before we dive into the main story about women in the Special Forces, let's first talk about an update that I have seen about the Army Greens. If you're not familiar with the Army Greens, there's probably a card that pops up about a video talking about them, but kind of a quick summary about it is that it's an old school type of uniform from back in the World War II era time frame that's just kind of a throwback uniform to try to make soldiers look, I guess, more professional kind of in a way. It is not to replace the service uniform. The senior service uniform, which is the formal uniform, is still going to be in place. That's going to be more of a, for formal events type of thing. But the Army Greens is intended for individuals that maybe are going to classes, people who are going to be working in an office environment, something like that, for them to wear that uniform rather than the camouflage uniform. Now, if you're someone working in the motor pool, working on a tank, those kind of things, that's probably going to get pretty dirty. Well, then, yeah, you're going to be wearing the camouflage uniform. But if you're like maybe on a day where you're going to be doing some classes or some days where you're not going to be possibly getting dirty depending on your job or whatever, then you're probably going to be wearing the Army Greens. So before, I had only heard that maybe by 2028 that they would start kind of getting this into the flow of things. I didn't really see a whole lot of information. I don't know if it had been out and I just hadn't seen it. It's a possibility that maybe I just didn't see the full official details as far as how the rollout's going to go, but now I have. Now I have seen the details, and maybe some of you are like me where you just didn't know about it. So it was actually in several phases. They had phase one, which was the decision. This was back in 2018 where they decided that, hey, we're gonna bring back the Army Greens and make it look all cool and presentable and be all professional and everything. From there, they went into phase two, which was the testing. This was from November of 2018 all the way until March of 2020. The first phase of that included 200 uniforms for recruiters. So 200 recruiters were kind of selected to kind of don the Army Greens and kind of represent the Army by wearing these uniforms probably while they were out recruiting. Phase two bumped that up to 500 recruiters, so then 500 recruiters were now out wearing the Army Greens while recruiting. They then moved to 500 uniforms for Army senior leaders, the Old Guard, and Army Band individuals. So those individuals started rocking the Army Greens as a kind of a testing type of thing and kind of represent the Army Greens. We are now getting ready to enter phase three of this whole thing with the Army Greens. That includes in April of this year, they're going to be available for purchase in the Army and Air Force Exchange services. So individuals will be able to purchase these through the Army Exchange they usually have, it's what's called clothing and sales for the Army anyways, and they have uniforms and everything there. So starting in April, a lot of locations are going to start kind of carrying these. It's not going to be available all over, so not every single clothing and sales is going to start having the Army Greens, but they are going to start rolling them out to these locations starting April. And then in July of 2020 of this year, they're going to start issuing these to new soldiers that complete AIT or Advanced Individual Training, or once they complete OSIT, are going to start receiving the Army Greens. So now new soldiers this year, by as early as July, are going to start receiving the Army Greens. So that means units could eventually start, implementing the use of these Army Greens back at the unit. So there's definitely a good chance that sometime during this year, maybe towards the middle or the late part of the year, you're going to start seeing a lot more soldiers wearing the Army Greens, maybe when they're doing things like doing classes or just having to work in an office environment. Now, some of you might be thinking, okay, so new soldiers are going to be getting them starting in July. Well, what about soldiers that are already in the Army or ones that come in from before July of 2020? The Army issues what is called a clothing allowance. So they get this usually on the 1-year anniversary of, their time in the Army. And gradually over the years, it increases and you start getting more and more of a clothing allowance. That clothing allowance is intended to replace uniforms that have faded, that have gotten ripped or whatever. Sometimes even your supply system will issue you like the camouflage uniform just for free, and you get some replacements through that system. But that clothing allowance is designed to be able to use it towards replacing some of those uniforms. Some soldiers use it just to have extra money during the paycheck, but that's not what it's for. It's supposed to be used for replacing uniforms. So that is what a soldier that is already in the Army that did not get issued these in AIT is supposed to use their clothing allowance to kind of offset it. So I don't believe it's going to be enough to maybe pay for an entire uniform. So some of it's probably gonna have to come out of your pocket, possibly, I believe, but it is going to offset it with that clothing allowance. I have not seen when it's going to be required for soldiers to own a pair, so that may still come like later, maybe in 2021 or something like that, to where, soldiers are authorized to start wearing them and receive them and go buy them, but there might be a time limit later on as far as when it will be required that all soldiers must own a pair of the Army Greens. So be on the lookout to start seeing soldiers rocking the Army Greens, the old school World War II style dress uniform. If I get any more information as far as like a requirement as to when soldiers are required to have that, then maybe there'll be some kind of update video in another future video to kind of give out that more details if it becomes available. So now let's talk about the main story that I want to talk about, which there's a good chance we are about to see the very first female Green Beret or the very first female in the Special Forces. Now, the story that I'm seeing is from a few days back, and it was saying that we're possibly weeks away from this individual passing the Q course, which the Q course or the qualification course is kind of the final step to get into the Special Forces. You have SFAS, which is a 24-day process that you have to go through to get evaluated and possibly make selection. And if you pass that and make selection, then you go on to the Q course or the qualification course. So she has already passed SFAS and she is into the Q course and a couple weeks out from finishing the Q course, actually. Now, the Special Forces has not released the name of this individual, possibly for security purposes or upcoming missions or whatever the case is, but the Special Forces has not released the name of this woman. We do, however, know that she is in the National Guard, so she will be a part of the National Guard unit that is Special Forces, and she's going to be an 18 Charlie, which is a Special Forces engineer. Now, I wasn't even aware that you could have females in the Special Forces. I thought that was kind of the one MOS that was still not open to both male and female, but apparently I'm wrong. Apparently there are females that have gone to SFAS, but there has not yet been any females that have finished the Q course. So if she completes it, and they expect her to be able to complete it, then she is going to be the very first female in history to finish the Q course and become the very first female to be in the Special Forces. So now the big thing about this is that this now makes it to where any MOS in the Army is available for both male and female. You know, before I thought that Special Forces was kind of the only one that didn't allow it, as you know, eventually we have females now in the infantry, tankers, scouts, all that kind of stuff, but there wasn't any females in the Special Forces, and I didn't even think they were allowed to actually do so, to try out for the Special Forces, but apparently they are. There just hasn't been any that have made it through the full test of trying to make it into the Special Forces. So we'll possibly see in the coming weeks if this female, and like I said, she's expected to pass, but we'll find out if we get any more details as far as whether or not she did or didn't pass, and if we do or do not, which like I said, they most likely predict that we will have the very first female in the Special Forces. So those are two main stories I kind of wanted to do a little news video on about the Army Greens and the first female that's likely going to be in the Special Forces. What are your thoughts on these two stories? What do you think about the Army Greens? Do you think it's a good choice? Do you think it's smart for the Army to have like this more formal type of uniform for, you know, an office environment or for doing classes or something that doesn't require them to get dirty? Or do you think that that's just kind of a waste and you just prefer that keep the dress uniform, the ASUs for formal events, and keep the camouflage uniform for your day-to-day kind of work attire? And then as far as female in the Special Forces, I know there are some of you that are hardcore Army and feel that women don't belong in combat arms. You know, that's your personal opinion. You know, me personally, I don't care. As long as females are not treated, you know, special, as long as they are doing the same job that is required to do for that job, I'm cool with it. I don't care if they're male or female, but I would like to know your guys' thoughts, but don't use this as a platform to bash women in the military. I just want to simply know your thoughts. Keep it respectful as far as why maybe you feel, you know, that it's okay to have females in the Special Forces or even combat arms in that general, or why you maybe feel that it's not a good idea to have women in combat arms or in the Special Forces in this case. So leave your comments down in the comment section down below. I'd love to hear from you guys. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to hit that thumbs up. Check out links down in the description for other videos, including my social media. I'm ThatChrisChaos, and I'll see you next time. See ya.